But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs.
Hi friends. Is having money wrong? No. It's injustice plus wealth that is wicked. It's when the means to the end don't matter, when oppressing people and lying doesn't matter in order to achieve great wealth, then it's just wrong. This is a no-brainer, right? So, on today's video, I would like to welcome you to the beach and the beautiful ocean behind me. And I want to discuss the history of the hemp plant and how lies fueled by greed have kept the plant prohibited for so long. So to start, let's just review what hemp is and how it can be used.
Hemp is a type of cannabis that has a plethora of uses. So first, from the flower of the hemp plant, we find medicine. This is where all those cannabinoids are, including CBD. The stalk of the plant can provide mulch, fiber, paper, pulp, textiles, building materials, and bedding materials. The leaves of the plant can provide feed, tea, medicine, infusions, bedding, mulch, and compost. And from the seeds of the plant, we can get animal feed or food packed with protein, skin and body products, paint, varnish, ink, and fuel. Because there's less than 0.3% THC, hemp can't get you high. I want to make sure you caught that hemp can produce fuel. We'll touch on this more shortly. Let's review cannabidiol, of course, better known as CBD. Now, CBD has been shown to reduce inflammation, reduce cell growth in cancer tumors, reduces pain, reduces anxiety, reduces insomnia, reduces seizures and muscle spasms, slows bacteria growth, lowers blood sugar levels, promotes bone growth, manages psychosis, and protects nervous system degeneration. Okay, let's check out hemp paper versus tree paper. Now, 1 acre of hemp equals 4 to 10 acres of trees over a 20-year cycle. Hemp stalks grow in 4 months, whereas it takes trees 20 to 80 years. Hemp has a higher concentration of cellulose. This is the principal ingredient in paper. Trees are made up of only 30% cellulose, requiring the use of toxic chemicals to remove the other 70%. Hemp, on the other hand, can have up to 85% cellulose content. Additionally, hemp paper is more durable. It doesn't yellow, crack, or deteriorate like tree paper. Hemp paper can be bleached and whitened with hydrogen peroxide, which doesn't poison waterways like chloride and bleach, such as used for wood pulp paper. Hemp paper lasts hundreds of years. Regular paper is unlikely to reach 50 years. And hemp paper can be recycled 8 times. Regular paper, only about 3 times. Let's take a closer look at cellulose. This is the principal ingredient that makes paper and plastics. Now, hemp is the most concentrated producer of cellulose we can grow. Like most plants, it removes carbon from the atmosphere, and hemp plastics are non-toxic, pesticide-free, recyclable, and biodegradable.
So beside competition with hemp paper, there's a direct connection between the prohibition of cannabis and the introduction of opioid pharmaceuticals and synthetic plastics. In the 1800s, morphine was first extracted from the opium plant by a German pharmacist. Now, in the proper situation, morphine is an incredibly effective pain medication. In fact, it was used in the Civil War on the battlefield for soldiers who were going through extreme, horrific pain. Unfortunately, after the war, so many soldiers became addicted, it became known as the soldier's illness. So the German pharmacist names morphine after Morpheus, the classical pagan god of sleep and dreams. Interesting, right? Here at TGA, we always like to think about the deeper meaning and possible other realm forces behind things. So it's interesting to me that this drug would have been named after sleep and dreams and a pagan god. I don't think the German pharmacist meant or intended or realized he would be somewhat igniting an entire industry that would be somewhat rooted in keeping people asleep and in the dark. But what if there was a darker power at work, a more sinister force that was trying to perpetuate lies and to keep people away from plant medicine and to help ignite this entire industry that would eventually lead to an epidemic with opiates? Speaking of Morpheus and the Matrix, Morpheus offers Neo 2 pills. He says, "Neo, you are a slave, born into bondage, into a prison you cannot see or smell or touch, a prison of your mind. I can't show it to you, you have to see it for yourself. You take the blue pill, you wake up in your bed and keep believing whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth." So I like to think I'm kind of like Neo, and we know that he takes the red pill without hesitation. So, with that said, let's get into a little bit more of the history behind this prohibition of hemp and come along with me down this rabbit hole.
So let's fast forward 100 or so years to the 1920s and 30s, when there was an outpouring of new synthetic materials. DuPont was making plans to create nylon, the world's first true synthetic fiber, made from coal tar and petroleum-based chemicals. This product would replace all-natural hemp as a common material, just as hemp was beginning to receive a lot of attention for being the amazing crop that it is. William Hearst was a media mogul of the time. He built the nation's largest newspaper chain and media company, Hearst Communications. DuPont supplied the chemicals needed for Hearst to process his newspaper. At the same time, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics is created, led by Harry Anslinger, one of the biggest supporters of cannabis prohibition. The elites conspired to protect their pockets by a frankly quite brilliant plan of simply changing the name of the cannabis plant. In the 1930s, the word hemp was discarded and cannabis, the scientific term, was hidden from the public. Instead, the word marijuana was invented to portray cannabis as something new and unrecognizable, a drug to be feared. Now at TGA, we want to acknowledge there was a more sinister power behind the humans, working at many levels and through much greater evils during this time, namely Hitler, who was emerging as the leader of the Nazi Party. Back home, the Great Depression was in full swing. So, the issue of cannabis was not on the public's radar, and rightly so. It was a perfect time for the elites to take advantage of divisiveness and racism to fuel their narrative, distracting the public from the transliteration of the word cannabis. For Hearst to prevail, he had to protect his chemically processed tree paper newspaper from the competition, more efficient, sustainable hemp. So he repetitively slandered cannabis publicly through ads claiming reefer madness. Anslinger took full advantage of this deception to further the agenda to pass laws to prohibit cannabis. By 1931, because of the deception, fake news, and fear-mongering, 29 states outlawed marijuana, which included non-psychoactive hemp. And it didn't stop there. Unfortunately, the deception and confusion continued during World War II, when farmers had to watch USDA film Hemp for Victory because they needed hemp for war materials. Farmers that grew hemp were waived from serving in the military, along with their sons. Also, during this time, Henry Ford himself manufactured the body of an automobile from hemp-based plastic. In stark contrast, at the same time, brutal segregation laws remained in effect throughout the U.S., incriminating hundreds of thousands of people who spent combined millions of years in jails, prisons, and on chain gangs for drug charges, including those involving hemp and cannabis, or marijuana. Unfortunately, we know that this trend has not changed much in recent history, as far as people getting locked up for using cannabis. Now, production of synthetic plastics leaped during the war. In 1939, there were 213 million pounds of synthetic plastic. In 1945, 818 million pounds of synthetic plastic. After the war, Americans could consume as much cheap plastic goods as they wanted. In 1935, nylon was successfully created. Nearly a century later, we use the unsustainable product in so many everyday items: pharma packaging and pill plasticizers, clothing, food containers, cars, electrical equipment, and so much more. This all really gained momentum less than 100 years ago, in the 1940s. Today, these synthetic products, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, pesticides affect us at every level, even hormonally, including fertility, because we use them every day.
What exactly are plastics? Where do synthetic materials come from? Well, these man-made fibers are extracted from raw materials such as petroleum, which is crude oil, petroleum-based chemicals, petrochemicals, natural gas, and coal. These materials are extruded through what's called a spinneret, and they are spun into man-made fibers, which are then used to make synthetic products. So let's go a little bit deeper and think about the oil industry. Now, I'm no expert on this subject, but I do find it fascinating. I recently saw a podcast where a woman who worked in counter-terror had realized over the course of her career that all terrorism is funded by oil money and natural gas money. It's actually needed to fund the terrorism because this is the only real commodity that these countries have to offer, and other countries are dependent on purchasing the oil. When it comes to our supply of oil and natural gas, the United States became the top producer in 2017. This was a direct result of hydraulic fracturing or fracking, which is a proven drilling technology that extracts oil, natural gas, geothermal energy, and water from deep underground. So the US was the top producer, but when looking a little closer in my research, I found that the top revenue earners for oil and natural gas are Saudi Arabia, Russia, and China. So prohibiting hemp has also contributed to being dependent on these other countries that supply our fuel and the oils we need to produce synthetic oil-based plastics. This keeps the few at the very top very rich. Add the future of batteries taking the place of crude oil products and monopolies on that forefront, namely coming out of China. We truly have an uphill battle to get back to locally sourced, sustainable products. To conclude, the hemp plant can easily be grown anywhere, abundantly and inexpensively. It is rich with oil and cellulose, so it could produce our oil, biodiesel, natural-based plastics, car parts, and clothing, and on and on and on. Prohibiting hemp keeps us dependent on non-plant-based oil and gas, therefore dependent on those countries that supply it, ultimately contributing to funding things like terrorism, radical militia groups who have agenda for war, as well as those in high positions of power that really desire world control. Now, world control sounds a lot like trying to play God. And if we zoom out and we think about the ultimate profiteer of war, the one who is bent on destruction and chaos, the one who's always been an adversary to Yahweh God and Yeshua our Savior, the one that wants to be God, it's Satan himself. Okay, enough of that rabbit hole. Let's move on.
In the 1960s, perpetuation of cannabis prohibition simultaneously happens as fentanyl is created in Belgium. It is 100 times, and today as much as 10,000 times, stronger than morphine, making it 33 times stronger than heroin. It is fully synthetic. A year after fentanyl's creation, U.S. company Johnson & Johnson purchased the pharmaceutical company that created it. The same year, at the UN's Single Convention Treaty, Anslinger, we remember him, represents the U.S., and cannabis is added to prohibited drugs. A couple years later, in 1970, the Controlled Substances Act is created. The act classified all forms of cannabis, including non-psychoactive hemp, as Schedule 1, the most dangerous of all drugs. Fentanyl is labeled as Schedule 2, safer than cannabis. Labeling and classifying cannabis and hemp as the most dangerous of all drugs made it federally illegal in the US.
So, marijuana is still on Schedule 1, but there is legislation trying to remove it from the CSA. I will keep you updated on that progress. And as of 2018, hemp was finally separated from marijuana and removed from the CSA. So now, with the proper licensing, farmers can grow hemp, and people like me can offer hemp-based CBD to you. This is promising, but it's going to take time to get things going and growing, and for the public to transition to a mindset of plant-based industrial items and medicine. There's been a lot of demonization. So I believe that if we can do this as a culture, we're just going to be so much better off for our own health, for future generations, and for the planet.
As of now, Schedule 1 status on the Federal Controlled Substances Act makes researching those substances difficult. Plus, our medical system is more comfortable with medicating a symptom instead of discovering its root. The public conditioned to believe they need a pharmaceutical. Plus, nature as medicine is so far removed from the original design that many are skeptical or blind to the healing properties of food and plants. Plus, corrupted medicine leads to damaging side effects, leading to more pharmaceutical drugs, leading to more damage. Plus, synthetic products, foreign oil, and prison industries dominating all equals a cycle of insanity where massive profiting, fueled by love of money for the few in power, grows.
At TGA, we always aim to bring truth and knowledge, but more importantly, encouragement. Despite this synthetic illusion, despite this mess, good will win. There is one bent on destruction and tempting humans through love of riches to perpetuate lies, but in the end, it will be exposed. Now, hemp can't save the world. It can't truly heal us, but I believe if we can incorporate it more, we can get a little bit closer back to that garden experience that was originally intended. However, I also believe that there is an eternal garden coming by way of a righteous and holy and just and loving Father. All will be regenerated. All wicked deeds will be exposed and forever triumphed over. In the end, good will win. So thank you for joining me today and going down the rabbit hole. I want to remind you that you are loved, you are known, and you are never alone. Don't worry. Good wins. Bye.